I'm joined now in Cape Town by Peter Linley. He's from Old Mutual Equities. Peter, such a pleasure to have you on today. Clearly your tie isn't matching South Africa's market performance for the day. We're back above that 52,000 level point mark, and despite the volatility and the nervousness, something obviously is keeping the markets afloat. Any explanation as to why?
Well, you just take it on a longer term view. I can't always explain a single day move, but it's clearly interest rates and, you know, the very strong move by the ECB to do whatever it takes to continue to try and reflate the Eurozone. So it's a question of low interest rates that is a strong stimulant to investors' appetite to buy equities.
Should we be worried about China? We did see the Chinese inflation numbers coming in at a 5-year low. The correlation that this obviously has with regard to the resources play and commodities prices. Should we be reading with that number with a little bit of skepticism, perhaps?
I think China does deserve caution. I personally have long been cautious about China, which has supported my lower view or lower exposure to commodities over the last few years. I don't think it's necessarily something that you need to have scare concerns about, but I think that growth in China is more towards the 5 or 6% than at the 7% reported level. I think China is continuing to go through an adjustment from an investment-led economy to more of a consumer economy. They're trying to bring things under control. I think they're succeeding, and I think that China will be better off in the longer term for what they're doing at the moment. Than by continuing in the way that they were before. So I think it's something you have to watch carefully, but I don't think it's necessarily something to be hugely perturbed about in the short term.
Peter, given what we're seeing out of several of the mining companies in South Africa, depressed earnings is a common theme across the board. Is this perhaps an opportune buying time for these shares, especially for the long-term players? A lot of deep value investors have been indicating.
Well, if you look at the industry itself, I mean, Northern's purchase now from Aquarius, I think, is more of a strategic move. And it's a smart move. It gives them an ability to access an ore body that they already have, and that will facilitate, obviously, for them, better prospects in the future. For mining companies, generally speaking, I think the challenge right now is a huge amount of oversupply globally. It's obviously dependent on which commodity you're in. In something like iron ore, it's far more of a challenge than perhaps in some of the other areas. But that is the big deal. We don't have enough demand to meet the kind of supply that is around. So you'll continue to see the supply adjusting downwards. And I think mining shares will continue to be a little bit of a challenge. I mean, in the longer term, I think there is some interesting value emerging in some of the counters. But in my view, you're likely to see lower commodity prices before you see higher commodity prices, but calling the bottom of commodities is very, very tricky.
What about your thoughts on gold, Peter?
Gold is a challenge for anybody to try and forecast. I think that in a world of increasing uncertainty, volatility, well, that's a bit of a strange thing to say. I think the last 5, 6, 7 years have been very uncertain, but it has a place in any portfolio. I can't say that I'm hugely bullish on gold in an environment of low interest rates. I think you're going to see interest rates declining even more in emerging markets now, and the general trend is downwards. So gold is not particularly inviting in that kind of environment, but it is a useful portfolio diversifier. Personally, for myself, in Investors Fund, which I run, I don't hold any gold. I've got a small amount to Goldfields, which wasn't a great thing for the last quarter, but it's been a good move for the last 3 years. But it is a useful diversifier, and going forward, it might be a place to put a little bit of money in a world that continues to be very uncertain.
And is that volatility and uncertainty something that will remain for the rest of 2015, judging by your estimations?
Yeah, I think it will. We've got to see that Europe has what it takes in order to get traction in growth. That's absolutely critical that they do that. We need to carefully watch what happens in terms of the impact of the kind of things happening in Greece and around Greece and what impact that may have. So I think we're in for a period of continued volatility. Markets are high. I think the South African market does look expensive, but you have to adjust for bond yields, which are very low at the moment, or have come down significantly in the last 2 months. The US looks less expensive, to be honest. So I think in this kind of environment, expect volatility, but I think also expect continued support for equity prices.
Just to look at some other companies out with updates today, Mondi out with a trading update, expecting to see an improvement in earnings. Is this a firm favorite for you over SAPI perhaps?
Yes, it is. I've long been a fan of Mondi. It's a quality business, quality management, and I think they really know what it takes in order to sweat the assets that they have and to deliver competitive returns to shareholders. And once again today they came out and confirmed that, and you saw the share price up very nicely on the back of that, up 2.5–3%. So yeah, very encouraging move again from Mondi.
Sun International also went out with a trading statement, and a lot of restructuring taking place with regard to that business there. You perhaps bullish as well with regard to the casino business and entertainment. Could it see an uptick now that consumers have some kind of inflationary relief?
Look, I like what they've been doing in Sun International. I think management has been adding value there. But to be frank, if you look at the result at the moment, you're not seeing a lot of top-line growth yet. You may see that going forward. You are seeing benefits from restructuring and also growth off a lower base. So, it's been an interesting one to watch. I think the moves they've done seem to make a lot of sense. So we'll look at it carefully. But so far the results don't necessarily reflect a very buoyant consumer at this stage.
Just to close off with, Peter, your thoughts on the currency. Just last week, Thursday, we saw significant strengthening in the rand. We were at about 11.30 and even lower at some point. Today, against the weakness does seem to persist. It's at 11.69 against the US dollar. Again, does this just highlight the kind of volatilities that one can expect to see in the markets going forward?
Look, you have to be careful when you look at the rand, because you need to look at it against the euro as well as looking at it against the dollar. What we have seen is a very strong dollar over the last 12 months, and that has made any currency look pretty weak. The rand, in fact, has actually strengthened against the euro over the last 12 months. But if you look at the rand on a trade-weighted basis and you look at the fundamentals, the economics around the rand, you have to appreciate that the rand is fundamentally a weak currency because of the large current account deficit that we run. However, having said that, I think that the lower oil price certainly helps things in terms of the economy and in terms of our imports, lower costs for imports. And I think that if you look at the desperate search for yield globally, that is encouraging capital to flow into South Africa in terms of portfolio flows particularly. And I think that will provide some support to the rand in the short term. So I've been very much a bear on the rand over the last few years. But at the moment, I think it wouldn't surprise me if you actually saw some consolidation. Maybe you're seeing a little bit of weakness now, but again, you need to see the potential for it to maybe improve a bit against the dollar. But that could be more about the dollar taking a breather after a very strong run. And as I said, against the euro, in fact, the rand has actually strengthened. So one needs to look at that very carefully.